The Brewhouse was created to capture and share with you the long history of the Genesee Brewery, but the brewery itself isn't half as interesting as the beer and the people who make it. Visit GeneseeBrewhouse.com. Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Nice to have Nate Rowan back in the house, dressed up. Now, is it Nike or is it the Red Wings that insists that you wear that?
I just like wearing it because it's a good opportunity. It's comfortable.
All right, good to see you again. Mike Catalana co-hosting here. Pat Duffy in a John Wallace jersey.
One of my faves, right? If I'm not mistaken, now that the draft is over, the last first-round pick for the NBA, Greater Rochester area. Am I missing somebody? It's John, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that could be
the
until
next one's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Next year. Here we go. Ready to roll.
Yeah.
All righty, Nate. New York Yankees this week hit home runs in the 28th consecutive game, Major League record. Can you slug your way to a World Series title?
I don't think there's evidence to suggest that you can or can't, but last year, 8 of the top 10 teams in terms of home runs made the playoffs. The Red Sox were 9th in baseball in home runs, but led baseball in runs scored. The year before, only 2 of the top 8 teams in baseball in terms of home runs made the playoffs. The year before that, it was 3 of 8. And the Cubs were 13th the year that they won in 2016. So I think it's harder to rely on the home run in the postseason because, number one, the conditions are more difficult. It's cooler. The ball doesn't travel as well. So that's certainly an impact. But when it comes to the postseason, you win on pitching. You know, the Baltimore Orioles a couple years ago, they slugged their way to the postseason. They got to the playoffs. I don't think hit very many home runs at all because pitching is just better in the postseason. So that's not to say that they can't sustain that, but it is more difficult to hit home runs in the postseason.
I know that we've talked about this before. Aesthetically, do we like this trend?
It's too many this year. The only reason I say it's too many is you can still have a lot and not be where they seem sort of cheap. But going back to the Yankees, that game when they set the record on Tuesday night, I think is why you look at it and say it's going to be a problem for them in the playoffs. They hit 2 homers, first 2 at-bats. They hit 1 in the second inning. They got the lead in that game. The rest of the game, I thought they played horrible baseball, terrible on the base paths. Their pitching struggled, and if it wasn't the fact that it's Toronto and not a Boston or a Houston against them, I think they end up losing that game. They didn't get a clutch hit the rest of the night. Nothing else really worked for them, but they survived. That's the kind of game you survive in the regular season. You pounded out 3 home runs and you won. Now, Pat's over here thinks this is an old man take. This is not about the old man.
This is the definition of an old man take. It has a walker and it smells funny. This is an old man take.
It's not about I don't like home runs. I like home runs. I just don't like the fact that it is the all or nothing. Uh-huh. And then as you translate, baseball is the sport that changes immensely from the regular season to the postseason, does it not? I mean, it's a different game.
I'll listen to your argument about whether a team can sustain and win with home runs, but don't sit here and tell me it's not entertaining and it's too many home runs. You know what I hate? Too much cake or beer. It's horrible, right? Oh, God, please stop giving me cake. Bro, it's the most exciting thing in baseball to the casual fan. I get that you guys are nerds, and I'm with you too. I enjoy watching a pitcher's duel. I do.
Not a pitcher's duel.
Even a game where you got a couple of singles and doubles that'll be heading all parts of the field. I get that. But baseball has a problem, and you know this, right? It's hard to attract a casual fan to sit and enjoy an entire baseball game. If I have the likelihood of 4 to 6 home runs throughout a 9-inning game, I'm going to sit and watch that entire game.
So let me ask you, Pat, so would you prefer if all the other guys strike out? You see maybe 4 or 5 home runs, but everybody else is striking out. That's the problem with the trend is that it's all or nothing.
I get it. But then let's look at the NFL, right? We're at a point now, or at least we were for a while, where it was a 1-yard gain, 60-yard bomb. And NFL ratings have never been as high, despite the controversy that they faced. People want all or nothing.
Well, they want offense. I would say to you, if Aaron Judge is going to hit the ball 420, I want to see that. If Gleyber Torres has an inside-out swing that somehow gets over the wall in right field, and because of the baseball, it becomes a home run, they aren't quite the same thing.
I would be careful making that point as hard as you are, because it might hurt your hip, because that is an old man take.
To that point, talking to your interns in the press box the other day, all of them, and to a man, would rather see the home run derby than the All-Star game. which I think speaks to the same point.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, guys are just trying to hit the ball as far as they can. They're not just trying to poke it out. The home run derby is a little bit different because those guys go up there wanting to put on a show.
Yeah.
You know, in the regular season, they're just doing anything that they can to score runs, and a lot of times it's now become just hit the ball over the fence, no matter what the conditions are, no matter what the stadium dimensions are.
You can equate it a little bit to the three-point shot in basketball. The fact that I love seeing the threes, I do think there are teams in games, Houston being an example, where it's a three nearly every time down court. Now, they can make them, but it does sort of diminish the game at times. I love the three. You just don't need to take it every time down court.
This is the Rochester Press Box. We are presented by the Genesee Brewhouse and talking Buffalo Bills next. The Press Box is brought to you in part by Bay & Goodman Pizza, a local Rochester favorite. Corner of North Winton and Browncroft, Bay & Goodman Pizza. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us in the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Talking Buffalo Bills. LeSean McCoy, I don't know if they have the quote exactly right, but he was like last week said, "I'm a very difficult guy to replace." Is he?
I don't think so, in the sense of the McCoy we saw last year and in parts of the year before that. Again, it's going to be an interesting dynamic when they come to camp because they do have replacements in place for him. They have a veteran running back. They drafted a young guy. They have another serviceable guy in Yeldon. I think they're basically saying, okay, LeSean, we're supporting you. Let's see what you got. We've talked about it here. I'm still surprised that he is on the roster. But based on the way it'll work with the cap, I think they're going to look at it and say, if he's the old LeSean, at least can show that, then I think he's going to get every opportunity to be the guy again. That evidence hasn't been there. Now, this year you got more help at wide receiver, hopefully a better offensive line, another year for Allen that maybe some of this comes back. It's a one-year thing for him.
Only 2 years ago, he was the whole team.
But the whole team wasn't all that great. I mean, listen, the playoffs were awesome, but you snuck into the playoffs, right? This wasn't a juggernaut of a team, and maybe LeSean McCoy meant that he's a hard guy to replace because he has some kind of blackmail in the front office, because that's the only explanation I'm taking as to why they're supporting him so hard. Listen, by keeping LeSean McCoy in the position that he's in. Listen, I get send him out at training camp and see what he can do and make a decision there, but it doesn't seem they're going to do that. You're only putting more pressure on Josh Allen, because if you send him out there opening day and he's the LeSean McCoy that he was last year, well, what are you doing with this second-year quarterback and absolutely no run support? And LeSean McCoy is not a guy. He's been really good in the locker room as being a Buffalo Bill when it comes to sound bites. But if they sit him down and they go with somebody behind him, you think he's going to be okay with that?
No, but I think they leave themselves now the option of making a change, right? I do think those guys are on the roster.
He's got something on his chest that could cause a huge problem.
It could.
How important do you think the running game is to this team going into Allen's second year now?
I think it's important. I think, like, if you look at the Saints, for example, if the Bills can establish a running game and then allow Josh Allen enough time to set up the play action and go deep, that can just add another element to their offense. It's just interesting to me that the Bills are going this route of so many running backs when the league has, by and large, gone away from, relying on the running game.
We had fullbacks last year. Didn't we have more fullbacks in the whole rest of the league?
Exactly. But that doesn't mean that they can't succeed. The biggest thing that Mike touched on, they've improved their offensive line and they've improved wide receivers. Last year, there wasn't a single wide receiver on the team that you would be threatened by.
Okay, but you know what a big Bills fan I am. Improving the wide receiver core wasn't that hard.
No.
They're not a good wide receiver core.
But if they have, we talk about, you look at run yards and passing yards, but let's be honest. Some of the passing yards are basically glorified runs. The Bills didn't have a lot of that last year.
Sure.
They didn't have the guy you could depend on, quick dump-offs, and honestly, McCoy was not as effective as I think a lot of people think he should be in the passing game.
Absolutely.
Because I think he should be a terrible matchup for other teams, and this is where Allen picks up some gimme yards, where he's dumping off passes to backs or It's maybe a tight end that can catch the ball, or maybe Cole Beasley over the middle. But it's effectively back, get it out of your hands, and let the guy run.
I hope they
with
don't
it.
get away from it too far, because I get the feeling that they're rushing Allen into a wide open offense. He and maybe, like you said, the receiving core isn't ready to take on.
Here's what your biggest fear should be as a Bills fan. Sean McDermott has shown that he is a stubborn person when it comes to decisions he's made. Nate Peterman. My fear is that Josh Allen showed a lot of success running the ball last year. So their idea is, well, if LaShawn McCoy doesn't work out, we can just keep feeding the ball to Josh, and he's going to run it up the middle, and he's going to end up hurting himself trying to overextend. That's my big fear here.
Yeah, I would worry about that too, except they really have put themselves in a position. Again, let's take a step back, or take a step forward and say they make a decision on McCoy that he's going to be gone. They're going to trade him, they're going to release him, whatever it is. You're going to sit back and say, wow, every decision they made led to that.
Okay.
So they are in a much better position if they decided to move on from McCoy than they were a year ago. They've got a veteran, they've got a draft pick, they've got another guy.
And if he's not the guy, if they sit him on the bench, it may be in the best interest of the Bills to just let him go, to get him out of that locker room.
Or he's back healthy, shows enough, and they get one more year out of him at least.
Guys used to be able to get that old and be effective. I don't know, it changed.
Look at the guy next to him.
Okay, but he's been a partial. I mean, that's a whole other 10 minutes.
This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House. Like it or not, next. Here's the Press Box trivia question, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390.
Today is all about belief. Right? It's not enough for me to believe it. It's not enough for Coach Hill or Coach Barsham to believe it. You have to be the ones that believe that you are capable of running the way that we all know you are capable of, and that those negative thoughts that are coming into your head, you can acknowledge and push away. What's your response to them going to be? 5 more meters, 5 more meters, 5 more meters.
Here's the Press Box trivia answer, brought to you by Market View Liquor, where exceptional customer service meets an extensive selection. Jefferson Road at 390. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brew House. Pat, like it or not, baseball in London.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm a stadium guy, so I like seeing the layout of the stadium, and it's cool to see, this is what cricket should be, or this is where soccer should be, but now it's baseball. I don't get it. Is there an appetite for American baseball in London? I say American baseball like there's British baseball. Like, are there going to be people lining up to go see this? Because, we talked about it earlier, and you know how much I love baseball, and I separate minor league baseball from Major League Baseball because minor league baseball is an experience. You're having a little bit of a hard time selling baseball nationally to the country that you're in. Why then are you overextending yourself to trying to sell it to a country that's never really wanted it? I get going to Asia, there's an appetite for American baseball. I get going to South America, there's an appetite for baseball. London?
Is that the reason? Because there's not an appetite? You're trying to create one?
You're going to find out if there is one because you took 2 of the biggest teams in America. If people don't come out to support Yankees versus Red Sox, there's not 2 teams that they are going to come out and support. So, I think from baseball's perspective, it's worth the shot. I would be concerned. We just talked about the home runs in a previous segment. It's 385 to center field. There's going to be a lot of home runs in that series.
Oh, Mike cancels cable for this. He's not going to watch. Get out of here. I hate it.
It is interesting. When we were in London for the Bills game, you saw people from other countries. They were Germans or they were Italians, wherever it came. But you did see a lot of Americans who wanted to see American football. It's London. There's Americans all over the place and in other areas. I'm wondering if they're just trying to ignite a little bit more of Americans living abroad and get them back into baseball a little bit. I'm with Pat. I don't see that as being like, we love baseball here. There isn't even, and like there is in other countries where there's, great British baseball players in the United States and they're trying to bring the game up. I just don't see it at all.
Like you said, they're all in sending those 2 teams
in hockey,
over.
they go to Finland, they go to Sweden, and they showcase their young players or their veteran guys. There's not a veteran British player in baseball right now.
Like it or not, baseball possibly returning to Montreal.
Well, that whole situation with Tampa Bay is a little bit, it's fishy to me.
Insane, isn't it? Yeah.
You can't split a major league season between two cities. So you're telling me that that in Tampa Bay, when the team moves to Montreal, that they're going to welcome them with open arms and they're going to be the best fans.
You create demand
in baseball.
with a shorter schedule.
Well, he's flexing his muscles, the owner, to try to get a stadium. He basically is saying, if I don't get my stadium, I am moving to Montreal. But this talk of like split season, he may still get a new ballpark and be able to play in Montreal. My concern with the whole thing is that Montreal and Tampa Bay are two very different places. You can't all of a sudden switch the following year and say, well, we're going to open in Montreal and then play in Tampa Bay at the end of the season, because we have our weather here in Rochester and it's worse in Montreal early in the season. They would have postponed problems, and then you have to make up those games in Tampa. That's a nightmare scenario.
It's to force their way out of Tampa, and all 4 fans of the Rays are going to be really upset if they move to Montreal.
Yeah, permanently. I mean, I see it happening. There's a lot of support for Montreal. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business is next. And now here's this week's MVP Experience Stat of the Week, brought to you by Sport Clips, where it's good to be a guy. No appointment ever needed.
And now to Eichel. He floated one. Score!
Power up with Dunkin's protein-filled Power Breakfast Sandwich and Egg White Bowl. They're kind of like this, but with food. Try the new Power Breakfast Sandwich and Egg White Dunkin' Bowl. America runs on Dunkin'.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. This is the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business, brought to you by Dunkin'. America runs on Dunkin'. Pat.
Earlier this week, Bob Lee, legendary sports reporter and journalist, announced he was retiring from ESPN. And the thing about Bob Lee is he's the last of a dying breed. He's the last legitimate journalist left on ESPN. And you can make the argument he's the last legitimate journalist on national television, because things have changed, right? I mean, you watch this show. If you listen to the break room on WCMF, if you want people to listen and pay attention, you have to have a certain type of personality. I'm an idiot. I say a lot of stupid things. And then Mike's over here next to me. He says a lot of stupid things. And we argue about stuff. And it's all in good fun, even though he's really stupid. But people enjoy that. They seem to enjoy it. Every show you turn on, you got contrarians going up against each other. Bob Lee's not that type of guy. Bob Lee was quiet. Bob Lee was introspective. Bob Lee was going to get details from you that you didn't know you were going to surrender. Now, I get that the business has passed him by. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if I'm going to sit and watch Bob Lee over any other of these entertaining sports shows. But it is a sad day to see that part of sports journalism going away for the final time with the retirement of Bob Lee.
You know, it's a funny thing. I don't know that I ever saw that show, but it was comforting to me to know that he was there. And there was somebody that you could fall back on who was responsible.
It's like when great-grandma dies. I didn't visit great-grandma for 2 years, but oh my God, she's dead. Right?
At least Bob's still alive.
Yep. Yeah.
Go ahead, Nate.
The discussion about baseball in Montreal is clear that baseball is probably going to come back to the city of Montreal. And the concerning part about baseball coming to Montreal means that if they get a team, in addition to the teams that are already there will need to be another team for expansion. And my problem with baseball expansion is that there aren't enough good baseball players to fill major league rosters right now with the number of teams as they have. If you add 25 additional major league players on both of those teams, that's 50 additional guys, plus guys in the minor league system. There's not enough good players around now to fill the rosters that they have, let alone at 2 additional teams. The product in the minor leagues is already going to decrease because the major leagues are adding an additional roster spot next year. When they increase to 26, that's 1 good player in the minor leagues that is no longer going to be around. If they add 2 more additional major league teams, the major league product is significantly going to decrease, and that's my concern with baseball expansion.
What, is the talent pool shrinking? Like, what's causing this?
I don't think there's enough good pitchers, to be honest with you. Hitters have gotten better quicker than pitchers, and part of it is because teams are holding pitchers back. So name a single pitcher on the Baltimore Orioles. You can't do it.
Little piece of advice, though. I wouldn't say what you said to the guys in the dressing room when you see them later today. Just a tip.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. All right, the New York Knicks, we know, are idiots, right? I mean, they've proven that year after year. And then they're mad at the New York Daily News. And if you saw what happened, the Daily News, by the way, had one of the all-time great headlines when Kevin Durant, the future Knick, at least they were hoping so, ends up getting injured in the finals. And the headline of the Daily News was Knicks lose Game 5, which I thought was great. It was poignant because it fits what the Knicks' plan is. But then what did the Knicks do? They were upset with the Daily News. So they bar them from coming to the news conference where they introduced the top pick, R.J. Barrett. Well, it makes no sense on either place, certainly for the Knicks. Look, it doesn't work to be a sports franchise and deny access to media just because you're not happy about what they write. Because newsflash for you here, Knicks, the New York Daily News is going to write it whether you invite them to the news conference or not, and you're going to get crushed. I never understood that from sports franchises. Denying access just takes away your point of view. R.J. Barrett's an impressive guy. Put him up in front of the cameras. He's great. You would probably get pretty positive press from the New York Daily News if you didn't try to bar them. And then you got the fans who jump in and say, basically, the Daily News's job is to support the team or not be so harsh against them. Please, 2 decades plus of inept running of a franchise and the way they play is enough that the Daily News can take every shot in the world. They may be irrelevant or becoming irrelevant now, but it's still the New York Daily News. It's still the New York media. Knicks, open up the doors, let them see the mess you have, and hope someday that it changes.
We are the Rochester Press Box, presented by the Genesee Brewhouse. Unfinished Business brought to you by Duncan. Nate, good to have you back. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Mike, Pat, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on the Rochester Press Box.